Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're setting out to chart a course through, well, one of the most incredible journeys in history, really. It's the story of how a kidnapped slave completely remade the rules of the most powerful empire on Earth.
Right. And our mission for this deep dive is to figure out how Alexandra Laselska, a girl who had absolutely nothing, became Hurrem Sultan, the legal wife of Suleiman the Magnificent.
A move that meant tearing down 3 centuries of ironclad dynastic law.
Exactly. And the sources we're drawing on are, thankfully, quite rich. They range from these, very dry and partial accounts from Phoenician ambassadors all the way to the incredibly intimate personal letters that survive between Hurrem and Suleiman.
So we're really aiming for a full documentary-style exploration here, trying to get past the myth of this seductive villain to see the real person.
The political mind, the genuine love, and the profound trauma that really shaped her entire life.
Okay, so before we can even begin to understand Hurrem, we have to grasp the sheer, just overwhelming scale of the world she was thrust into. Let's set the scene. The year is 1520. What was the Ottoman Empire at that moment?
It was, quite simply, the global superpower, the absolute zenith of the Ottoman state. Suleiman had just taken the throne, and the empire stretched across 3 continents.
We're not exaggerating when we say that either.
Not at all. I mean, you're looking at a military and economic behemoth with borders reaching from the gates of Belgrade deep into Hungary, all the way down through the Balkans, controlling the Red Sea, the Middle East.
The critical trade routes.
All of them. And then it goes deep into Persia and commands North Africa right up to the Atlas Mountains.
So we're talking about an entity that controlled, what, over 20 million people?
Over 20 million souls. It was the economic, military, and spiritual heart of the Eastern world.
And at the very pinnacle of this vast, sprawling empire sat one man, Suleiman the First.
To the west, he was the Magnificent. But to his own subjects, he was the Padishah, the Master King, and maybe more importantly, the Zulula Fila Islam.
The shadow of God on earth.
Exactly. And you have to understand, that title isn't just poetry. It means his power was seen as semi-divine. It was unchallenged. It was absolute.
So when the Sultan acted, it was basically seen as the will of God.
It was a reflection of divine will. And the nerve center for all of this absolute power was Topkapi Palace in Istanbul.
Right, which wasn't just a home. That complex was the entire mechanism of government.
It was the heart, the lungs, the brain of the empire. And hidden deep within that labyrinthine structure was the institution that would determine the entire future of the dynasty, the imperial harem.
And we have to just immediately throw out the Western fantasy of what a harem was.
Oh, absolutely. This idea of it being some simple pleasure retreat is just
It's
wrong. The sources reveal a ruthlessly competitive, highly formalized political institution.
a battleground.
It was absolutely a battleground. If you were a woman in the harem and you bore the sultan a son, you instantly became a player in this deadly game of succession,
So these women weren't just idle concubines. They were political agents, really.
waging wars of influence that could decide who became the next sultan, who was appointed grand vizier, even what foreign policy the empire would pursue.
And the women who were brought into the system, they were trained for it, right? Rigorously prepared for this intense environment.
The preparation was incredibly intense and structured. Most of the harem women, who were called odalisques, were enslaved. They were sourced from non-Muslim lands, the Caucasus, Circassia, Eastern Europe, to make sure they had no outside loyalties to Ottoman families.
I see. So they were entirely dependent on the Sultan.
Entirely. And upon arrival, they went through this intensive education. They had to learn Ottoman Turkish, perfect court etiquette, study music, poetry, classical arts. They were being cultivated, intellectually and socially to potentially captivate and influence the man who ruled the world.
But this whole system, even though it was designed to create these influential women, was locked down by 2 ancient foundational rules that had protected the dynasty for 300 years.
And these are the systemic obstacles that Alexandra, our protagonist, is about to face.
What was the first one?
The first, and arguably the most important, was the one mother, one son rule. This was a really sophisticated piece of political architecture.
Designed to prevent what, exactly?
Designed to prevent a concentration of rival female power in the capital. So, practically, it worked like this.
Uh-huh.
If a concubine gave birth to a male heir, she was immediately retired from the sultan's. Well, from his bed.
So her sexual relationship with him was over.
It was over. Her duty then shifted. She was to raise her son in a provincial palace, a place like Manisa or Amasya. She'd move there with him, act as his mother while he governed, and prepare him for the throne.
And the key part is that she was kept physically and politically separate from the Sultan.
And from the capital. It scattered the mothers of potential heirs all across the empire so they couldn't conspire or build a deep power network in Topkapi. It was a structural safeguard.
A firewall against civil war, really.
Exactly. It had crippled previous empires.
And the second rule, this one seems even more unbreakable.
The Ottoman Sultan never married a woman. Ever. For 300 years, this was an unbroken rule.
Why? Why was marriage considered, beneath his dignity?
Because to marry would suggest he needed an alliance with a powerful family, which implies weakness. It complicates the absolute nature of his power. It could create rival claims to status from a wife's family.
So his lineage was supposed to come purely from the harem.
Purely. It guaranteed that the mother of the next sultan would be, by origin, a slave, dependent only on the sultan himself.
So these two rules, no staying after a son and absolutely no marriage, were the fundamental bedrock of the Ottoman state, a system built for ultimate stability.
And this is the central drama of our whole deep dive. An unarmed, unprotected, kidnapped teenage girl was about to arrive and just completely destroy both of these centuries-old traditions.
And she'd do it in just over a decade.
It's unbelievable.
All right, let's turn back the clock. We're leaving the magnificent, structured world of Topkapi, and we're traveling to the brutal, violent edge of the empire. The sources take us to Ruthenia, the homeland of Alexandra Lasowska.
Right. Alexandra was born sometime in the early 1500s, maybe 1502, maybe 1506. We're not entirely sure. But the region was known as Ruthenia, which is modern western Ukraine.
A very volatile, very dangerous borderland.
Constantly contested. And we have one crucial biographical detail about her. Her father was an Orthodox Christian priest.
Now, what does that tell us about the woman who would become Hurrem?
It tells us she was fundamentally different from almost every other woman who ended up in the harem. It means she was educated. She could read, she could write, she knew her scriptures, she had a trained mind.
Which, in a world where influence depends on intellectual sharpness, that's a kind of superpower.
It's her silent superpower. But that homeland of hers was synonymous with terror.
Absolutely. Ruthenia was the hunting ground of the Crimean Tatars. These were nomadic horsemen, vassals of the Ottoman Sultan.
And their entire economy was built on one primary export: human beings.
The scale of this slave trade is it's staggering. Our sources estimate that over 3 centuries, something like 3 million Slavic people were captured and sold.
3 million lives.
Yes.
Erased and traded. And Alexandra was one of them. We have to really take a moment and try to visualize the trauma of that.
The sources describe these raids: a sudden explosion of violence in the night. Fire, chaos, families just torn apart in an instant.
And Alexandra, a young woman, maybe barely a teenager, is violently seized. Her life transforms in a single moment from a respected priest's daughter to property.
And then the march begins, the nightmare march across the open steppe.
A vast, treeless plain all the way to the slave markets of Kaffa or Karasu in Crimea. It was an ordeal. If you couldn't keep up, you were abandoned or killed.
And once there, the captives were treated purely as merchandise.
Inspected by traders, often naked, checked for health, their beauty assessed, just like livestock, before being shipped across the Black Sea to Istanbul.
The psychological stripping away of identity must have been total. Your family, your home, your religion, your language, even your name, it's all gone.
Most people will be utterly broken by that. That's at the point of the process, to crush the spirit.
But Alexandra wasn't.
And that's the core of her story. She not only survived, she thrived. It suggests this almost unimaginable resilience. She didn't become a victim. She arrived in Constantinople, saw the massive walls, the Hagia Sophia, this great city rising from the sea.
The capital that had just conquered her.
And she must have decided right then that she was going to conquer it back. It's the ultimate pivot point. She adapted, she learned, she survived. She was an extraordinary psychological survivor long before she ever became a political player.
Okay, let's move into that pivotal year, 1520. Alexandra Lasowska is now inside Topkapi Palace, and her old identity is gone. She's given a new Ottoman name.
She becomes Hurrem, and the name itself is a profound window into who she was. Hurrem means the cheerful one or the laughing one.
Think about that. The staff in the harem who are dealing with hundreds of traumatized captives, they pick a name for this specific girl that signifies joy.
In a court that is defined by deep, silent scheming, suspicion, and fear, a genuine source of laughter would be revolutionary.
It makes you memorable, disarming.
It makes you stand out from the 300 other women who were just beautiful or just skilled. Hurrem enters the training, she masters the language, converts to Islam, learns the etiquette. But that trained, quick, witty mind, that was her edge. She wasn't just decorative, she was intellectually stimulating.
And she catches the eye of the man who matters most. Suleiman the Magnificent. Let's remember who he was at this point.
Suleiman was 26, a new sultan, highly cultured, very thoughtful. He wasn't some brutal hedonist, he was a poet. He wrote under the pen name Muhibi.
Which means the lover.
The lover. He was known for his moderation, his devotion to justice. That's where he gets the name Kanuni, the lawgiver.
And he already had an established favorite, Mahidevran Sultan.
Yes, Mahidevran was the mother of his eldest son, Prince Mustafa. By every measure of tradition, her position was secure. She was raising the heir presumptive. Her future seemed set. She's on track to become the Vali Sultan, the queen mother.
The most powerful woman in the empire.
Right. And then Hurrem entered the picture. And whether she was introduced because of her wit or her charm, or maybe even as a political move by the Grand Vizier Ibrahim Pasha, the result was immediate, shocking, and irreversible.
The court just watched in astonishment.
They did. Suleiman became utterly devoted to her. This wasn't a casual fling, it was exclusive attention. He stopped visiting any other women in the harem.
Which, in a harem with hundreds of women, is politically disastrous. It concentrates all influence onto one foreign slave girl.
It wasn't just scandalous, it violated the entire structural stability of the system. And then she started breaking the rules. In 1521, she has her first son, Mehmed.
So she should have been retired. That was the rule. Birth a son, go to the provinces.
She should have left the capital and Suleiman's bed forever, but she stayed. That was the first terrifying crack in that 300-year-old dynastic wall.
And she didn't just stay, she kept having children, completely destroying the one mother, one son rule.
She bore him 6 children in total. 5 survived to adulthood: Mehmed, Selim, her powerful daughter Mirima, Bezid, and the sickly Isengir. 6 children with the same woman. This completely ruined the system.
The traditionalists in the court, her rivals, they had no way to understand this. What did they blame it on?
Witchcraft. Dark magic. The rumors started immediately, and they were persistent, often fueled by Mahidevran's allies. They couldn't comprehend this kind of intellectual and romantic bond. So the only explanation was that this Slavic girl must have used potions from her homeland to bewitch the Sultan.
And those whispers became part of her legend. Meanwhile, the tension with Mahidevran, the established favorite, finally boiled over around 1525.
Yes, it turned into a physical fight. A violent, undignified scene inside the imperial chambers. Accounts say Mahidevran attacked Hurrem, pulled her hair, scratched her face, really wounded her.
And when Suleiman summoned Hurrem after, she refused to go, saying she was too disfigured to appear before him.
A brilliant tactical move. She didn't have to complain or demand justice. She just let the visible evidence of the violence speak for itself.
And Suleiman's response?
Swift, brutal, and definitive. Mahidevran was banished. She was sent to the provinces with Prince Mustafa forever. She was politically ruined.
So Hurrem had eliminated her main rival, but she still wanted more than just being the favorite concubine. She wanted the legitimacy of being a legal wife. Which brings us to that second, seemingly impossible rule.
The rule that had stood for 300 years? The Sultan does not marry. And yet, around 1533 or 1534, Suleiman did the unthinkable. He married Hurrem in a full public Islamic ceremony.
The shock of this event comes through so clearly in the historical sources. The Venetian ambassador's reports are just a testament to the upheaval.
The ambassador wrote back to Venice saying this event was most extraordinary, one absolutely unprecedented in the history of the sultans. The wedding was lavish, followed by huge feasts. It legitimized a foreign slave as the Haseki Sultan.
The chief consort, a title created specifically for her.
And it instantly elevated her above all other women, gave her a public legitimacy no concubine could ever dream of.
Let's just pause on that title, Haseki Sultan. It wasn't just the wife.
No, it signaled a political partnership. Becoming a legal wife meant she was now legally free. She could own property, engage in legal transactions, and most importantly, it gave her a formal institutional status in the court hierarchy. A concubine's power was totally dependent on the Sultan's affection.
Which could change at any moment.
Exactly. Her position was now part of the dynastic structure itself. It was secure.
But the question is, was this all a political calculation on her part, a brilliant manipulation to get legal status, or was it a reflection of genuine, deep love from Suleiman?
The answer is almost certainly both. But when you look at their surviving letters, the argument for profound, passionate love becomes just overwhelming. This is where we get to see the real humanity of their story.
Let's get into these letters. They were written privately during his long military campaigns, never meant for anyone else to see.
And they show this remarkable equality and intimacy. They didn't use formal titles of each other, but terms of endearment, shared jokes, and just desperate longing.
I think we should hear some of them. These are the words of the Sultan, the shadow of God on earth, writing to his wife, Hurrem.
Suleiman wrote, "My very own queen, my everything, my beloved, my bright moon, my intimate companion, my one and all, sovereign of all beauties, my sultan."
It's so affectionate, he goes on. My springtime, my merry-faced love, my daytime, my sweetheart laughing leaf, my plants, my sweet, my rose, the one only who does not distress me in this world.
And then he elevates her even more. He connects her directly to his imperial identity, using the names of the most valuable provinces in his empire.
He writes, my Istanbul, my Karaman, the earth of my Anatolia, my Badakhshan, my Baghdad and Khorasan, my woman of the beautiful hair, my love of the slanted brow, my love of eyes full of mischief.
He's literally telling her, "You are my entire empire, made flesh." It's an extraordinary statement of partnership.
And her replies show that same depth of passion.
Yes. Her letters are filled with this anguish of separation. She wrote, "My Sultan, there is no limit to the burning anguish of separation. I swear by God that when I am not with you, I am constantly weeping. Now spare this miserable one and do not withhold your noble letters."
When your letters arrive, I press them to my face, my eyes, my heart. Your slave, the one who longs for you, who cries tears of blood. That ache is just, it's palpable.
After years of marriage and power struggles, their connection was still founded on this very real emotional dependency.
And that dependency made all the politics possible. That connection gave her a direct channel to the Sultan that no one else in the empire, maybe except the Grand Vizier, could match.
And speaking of the Grand Vizier, Hurrem's rise brought her into direct, unavoidable conflict with the second most powerful man of the world, Ibrahim Pasha.
A formidable figure. Suleiman's best friend from childhood, a brilliant military strategist, and the Grand Vizier, a potential rival for the Sultan's heart and mind.
Right, and at first Ibrahim might have even seen Hurrem as useful, a way to balance Mahidevran. But as her status as Haseki Sultan grew and she kept producing heirs, she became a direct threat to his own power.
And Ibrahim made some fatal mistakes.
He did. He repeatedly clashed with Hurrem, insulting her, dismissing her influence, a very dangerous move. But even worse, he started getting far too ambitious. He began using the title of Sultan for himself.
Sultan Ibrahim, that's bordering on treason. It's a parallel claim to power.
It was an act of staggering arrogance. And in 1536, after years of this overreach, Suleiman had to act. Ibrahim Pasha was executed, strangled by the deaf-mute executioners in the palace in the middle of the night.
And while historians debate how directly Hurrem orchestrated it, there's no question that she benefited immensely.
Her influence became completely unchallenged. The political vacuum Ibrahim left was filled by her and her allies. It was a massive consolidation of power. Ibrahim was gone, Mahidevran was banished, and she was the legal wife.
And the final physical move that cemented her power happened shortly after. A fire devastated the old harem, and Hurrem convinced Suleiman to move the entire harem operation directly into the central complex of Topkapi.
That move was transformative. The harem was now located right next to the government chambers, the divan. It meant she was no longer a remote figure. She was a daily, constant physical presence at the absolute center of the empire.
She could influence decisions, appointments, just by being there, advising her husband over dinner. The slave girl from Ruthenia had literally woven herself into the central administration.
The stage was now set for what you could call the Empire of Hurrem, a period where she exercised political agency unlike any woman before her in Ottoman history.
Let's talk about those unprecedented roles she took on. She didn't just stay in the harem, she stepped onto the world stage of high diplomacy.
This is one of the most astonishing parts of her story. She became the first Ottoman woman to correspond directly with foreign monarchs. And she wasn't just sending pleasantries. She was conducting active foreign policy.
Her main correspondent was the King of Poland, Sigismund II Augustus.
Which is fascinating because Poland bordered her homeland of Ruthenia. She exchanged gifts, she negotiated border security, peace treaties. She was acting as a diplomatic channel, a role that was traditionally reserved for the male Grand Vizier.
So she was bypassing the bureaucracy, engaging in direct personal diplomacy. It gave her incredible soft power.
Right. And she also corresponded with Shah Tahmasp of Safavid Persia, a major Ottoman rival, navigating these incredibly delicate negotiations. She was a recognized player in the grand chess game of Eurasian politics.
Domestically, she solidified her influence through her family, specifically through her daughter.
Hurrem Sultan, who was known for her intelligence and powerful will, she clearly inherited her mother's political skill. and Mirima married Rustam Pasha.
A brilliant administrator, but often hated by the people.
A political genius. And he became Grand Vizier twice. So with Rustam Pasha as her son-in-law and chief minister, and Mirima as her ally, Hurrem had this unbreakable mechanism for implementing her will at the highest levels of the state.
Her influence during this period was, as you say, essentially unlimited.
It was. But political maneuvering wasn't enough to silence her critics, who still whispered about the witch who'd corrupted the Sultan. To truly legitimize her position, she launched a massive program of charity and building.
This is where we see her genius again. This charitable work, establishing these vakif, or pious endowments, it was piety, yes, but it was also pure political strategy.
It was the ultimate way to silence critics, display her devotion to Islam, and most importantly, secure her financial and political legacy for good.
Because when land was donated to a vakif, those assets became exempt from confiscation by the state, right?
Exactly. She used the vakif system to transform her personal wealth into perpetual institutional wealth, controlled by her and her daughter, guaranteeing her power survived even beyond her own lifetime. She established these independent, tax-free, legally immune foundations.
And her projects were monumental. The Seki Sultan complex in Istanbul, for instance.
A vast urban project, a magnificent mosque, a madrasa or school, a hospital for the poor, and an emirate, a huge public kitchen that fed hundreds every single day. She was literally building legitimacy in stone.
You can still see her impact today. The beautiful Hurrem Sultan, the Turkish bath, right near the Hagia Sophia.
And her charity reached across the entire empire to the holiest cities. She endowed foundations in Mecca and Medina. And in Jerusalem, her soup kitchen, the Seki Sultan Emirate, fed pilgrims and the poor for over 400 years.
It's the ultimate profound irony of her story. Alexandra Lasowska, the Christian-born slave, becomes one of the greatest female patrons of Islamic charity in Ottoman history.
She transformed a vulnerability, her foreign origin, into a strength by demonstrating unprecedented piety, using the vakif system to secure her legacy.
But despite all this power, all this charity, her position was still balanced on a knife edge. The ultimate threat to her and her children was still out there. Prince Mustafa.
Mahidevran's son, the senior heir. And the tension became unbearable, especially after 1541, when Hurrem's own oldest son, Mehmed, died. This left her two surviving sons, Selim and Bayezid, as the primary contenders against Mustafa.
And Mustafa was formidable. A skilled warrior, wise, and absolutely beloved by the Janissaries, the elite infantry. They saw him as the true heir.
And they saw the aging Suleiman at 59 as being too distracted by his wife. This is where we have to confront the terrible core dilemma of the Ottoman system. The law of fratricide.
The law that dictated that for the stability of the empire, the new sultan had to execute all of his brothers.
The stakes for Hurrem were existential. If Mustafa became sultan, her sons Selim, Bayezid, Cihangir would all be killed. Her daughter Mirima's power would be gone. This wasn't a political rivalry anymore. It was a fight for the survival of her bloodline.
So when we judge her morality, we have to remember she was playing by rules she didn't write. It was either her sons or Mustafa. There was no middle ground.
And the tragic climax comes in 1553. The Janissaries are openly murmuring about replacing the aging sultan with the vigorous Mustafa. Suleiman feels his throne is under threat.
And it's Hurrem's son-in-law, Rustam Pasha, who provides the alleged proof of Mustafa's treason.
Rustam produces letters, supposedly from Mustafa, showing communication with the Shah of Persia, an enemy of the state.
And the debate still rages. Were they genuine or forgeries manufactured by Hurrem's political machine?
We'll never know for sure. But what matters is that Suleiman chose to believe them, or perhaps he chose to use them as justification for a brutal, but in his mind necessary political act.
So in the autumn of 1553, while on campaign, Suleiman summons his son Mustafa to his tent at Eregli.
Mustafa arrives, maybe still trusting his father, maybe hoping to clear his name, but when he enters the imperial tent, the scene is horrifying.
There are no witnesses, no scribes, no counselors.
Only the deaf-mute executioners. The agents of the system who can neither hear the orders nor speak of what they saw.
And they fell upon the prince with bowstrings, the suit cords used for royal executions to avoid shedding blood. Mustafa was a strong man. He fought desperately for his life on the floor of that tent.
And as he was struggling, he was looking toward the back of the chamber. And there, concealed behind a thin curtain, was his father, Suleiman the lawgiver, watching his son die.
The aftermath was immediate chaos. The army was furious.
A near mutiny. The Janissaries wept openly, cursing the Sultan for his weakness and the witch Hurrem for orchestrating it. Suleiman had to temporarily dismiss Rustam Pasha just to calm them down.
The question remains, though, did Hurrem force this, or was this Suleiman, as lawgiver, upholding the brutal logic of the state?
I think the sources suggest it was Suleiman's political calculation. He had to decide if he could tolerate a beloved, popular son who was being openly courted by the army. He decided the threat was too great. Hurrem's influence certainly pointed him that way, but the final brutal responsibility was his.
And the bloodshed didn't stop there. The cost of her victory just kept climbing.
Immediately after Mustafa's execution, his infant son was also executed, eliminating any future rallying point. And then, tragedy struck Hurrem's own family. Her youngest son, Jahangir, died shortly after, supposedly from overwhelming grief over his half-brother's death.
And the two surviving sons who were supposed to inherit everything, Selim and Bayezid, they immediately turned on each other.
The seeds of fratricide, sown with Mustafa's death, blossomed between her own children. The rivalry was fierce, and it continued even after Hurrem died, ending with Bayezid being executed in 1561.
So she achieved her goal. Her son, Selim, survived and took the throne, but at the cost of 3 princes and a grandson.
A terrible, bloody cost. Yet, through all of this chaos and bloodshed, the profound love between Hurrem and Suleiman, it persisted.
It's astonishing. After 30-plus years, after all the children, all the machinations, the depth of their connection endured, let's hear that enduring affection from just before her final days.
She wrote, "My lord, the joy of my heart, the light of my eyes, your absence has set such a fire in my heart that it blazes and does not die. Have mercy on your slave and send me a letter quickly, so that I may find some comfort."
And he replied, "My own queen, my everything, my woman of the beautiful hair, my love of the slanted brow, my love of eyes full of mischief. Let my soul gain at least some comfort from your letters. May God never separate us."
In 1558, Hurrem fell gravely ill, and Suleiman, now 64, was completely devastated. The most powerful man on earth was reduced to helpless devotion, just spending hours by her bedside.
On April 15, 1558, Hurrem Sultan died in Topkapi Palace, having been Suleiman's legal partner for nearly 4 decades, the only woman in Ottoman history to achieve that status.
Suleiman never really recovered. He commissioned the greatest architect of the age, Mimar Sinan, to build a magnificent tomb for her, right next to his own masterpiece, the Suleimani Mosque.
And he continued to write poetry, now filled with profound grief.
It's heart-wrenching. He wrote, "How can I live without you, my queen, my everything?" He was a deeply mourning widower for his final 8 years.
He lived until 1566, dying in his tent during a siege at age 71. And his body was brought back to Istanbul and buried, as he wished, in a tomb right next to hers, together in death, as they had been in life.
The reign of Suleiman the Magnificent, the high watermark of Ottoman power, was over. And the woman who defined that era had fundamentally changed the structure of the empire forever.
And while her son, Selim II, was considered a relatively weak successor, Hurrem's true monumental legacy wasn't just producing one sultan, it was creating a political blueprint for female power.
Yes. She broke the old rules, she secured the legal status of Haseki Sultan, she demonstrated the power of the Vakif as an economic base, and she proved that moving the harem into Topkapi gave women access to the very heart of government.
And this blueprint ushered in the period historians now call the Kadınlar Sultanati, the Sultanate of Women.
A systemic shift. The door Hurrem kicked open was rushed through by a succession of extraordinarily powerful women. Her daughter, Mirma, continued to wield power. Then came Nurbanu Sultan, who corresponded with Catherine de' Medici.
Then Safi Sultan, who received ambassadors personally.
And finally, Kösem Sultan, who ruled outright as a regent for nearly 50 years. Every single one of them followed the structural, legal, and political path that Hurrem pioneered.
She proved that the walls meant to constrain women could also protect and empower them at the heart of the world's greatest empire.
And beyond the politics, her physical legacy endured for centuries. Her charities in Istanbul and Jerusalem fed the poor, healed the sick, and educated the youth, ensuring her name was blessed by the common people.
And then, 5 centuries after her death, her story just explodes onto the global stage, not through history books, but through television.
The Turkish series Muhteşem Yüzyıl, or Magnificent Century. It became this massive global phenomenon watched by hundreds of millions of people. It took this complex, ruthless, nuanced portrayal of Hurrem and made her internationally famous all over again.
And that show sparked a huge surge in tourism and public interest, making her maybe more famous now than she was in her own lifetime.
Which brings us back to the woman herself. She was neither a saint nor a simple villain. She was a deeply complex product of an utterly brutal system. She achieved greatness but she was absolutely complicit in the death of Mustafa. She played the game with unparalleled ruthlessness.
But we also have to remember she was a survivor, ripped from her home, forced to convert, forced to navigate a system designed to use and discard women. She founded hospitals, she built schools.
And she was genuinely, passionately loved by the most powerful man on earth. Their letters reveal a true partnership, a home they found in each other. She was human, capable of extraordinary cruelty and immense generosity.
Her story endures because it raises these fundamental, uncomfortable questions about survival, morality, and power. Alexandra, the priest's daughter, became a slave. The slave became the beloved concubine, the concubine became the legal wife, and the wife became the empress.
And that name she earned, Hurrem, the cheerful one, she somehow maintained that spark, that iron core of resilience. Through unimaginable trauma, she remade herself at every single stage.
Her story is truly not over. If you ever find yourself in Istanbul, you can walk in her footsteps. Visit the harem, see the walls of the great city she conquered.
And I invite you to stand there, maybe at her tomb beside the Suleimani Mosque at sunset. And just look out over the city. Don't try to judge her as a villain or a hero. Instead, just imagine her standing there, a woman with red hair and a mischievous smile. Was she grieving her lost son, calculating the future, or simply reflecting on the astonishing fact that she, the kidnapped girl, had survived and changed the rules of the world's greatest empire forever? That inner life, that moment of reflection that remains the enduring mystery.